In Soccer We Trust YouTube fam, how are you? And guess what? We asked you on Twitter if you had any questions for us. Make sure you follow us moving forward at ISWT Pod on the Twitter. And we received a lot of your questions, which means it's time to give you some answers. So please do us the honor of hitting like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let's get after it. Yes! What is up, everybody? And welcome to Mixed Discaroon's favorite podcast in Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Trashcan Cream Cheese Conradinho alongside only Hollywood Heath Pearce because Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies is too scared to answer your questions. So make sure that when you are done with this episode, you go to Twitter and or Instagram and give him a hard time because that is unacceptable. But yes, for everybody joining in, we're doing a special mailbag episode for you. We went on the Twitters and asked you to give us some questions, and you gave us a lot of questions. So we have to provide a lot of answers. So Heath, I don't know where you want to start per se.
I mean, I would love it, Jimmy. I would love it if you just asked me how I'm doing. Let's start with that.
Okay, well, how are you doing? Because that might be the most positive question and answer we might get on this.
Yeah, I know exactly. Because I'm worried. I'm worried in the direction we're heading right now. So at least maybe we check in, see how we're doing now, and then we'll see how we're doing towards the end of the episode when we got to go through all these types of questions.
Little temperature check. This one could be emotional.
I am doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm excited to get to the finish line of the World Cup here in Qatar. I've been here for over 30 days. And when you have days off, it's almost in some ways worse because you're itching for the next game. So you can kind of just, not say be done with it. We have a tremendous final on hand. So, well, by the time everybody listens to this, I'll be home. So just know that I'll be home and I'll be cozying up on the couch doing nothing. So that's, I guess I probably should get ahead of that.
On that note, then, we should probably do a good job of holding each other accountable in these mailbag episodes to make it as evergreen as possible, so it's not tied to a period that may no longer be worthwhile.
That's true. That's true.
Having said that, there's some questions in here, and a lot can change in the world in the next few days. So if we're off on any of those, we apologize.
I would be surprised though if U.S. Soccer came out with a decision that
you don't think they'll fire Gregg Berhalter on the eve of Christmas.
I don't think that they will. However, I do think that there is some urgency in some capacity if they were going to make a move to have somebody not Gregg Berhalter at the January camp, which is still on from what I understand. So, and you could have an interim, of course. You can have somebody come in there or, the
problem was when you do an interim and you get a couple of results, you go, we're not in a rush. We saw that last time. We did what? How long was that interim?
It was close to a year, right? Because we waited for Greg to get there when it was clear that's who it was going to be. And Dave Sarachan actually got some good results when he was in charge. Good old Dave. So speaking of the coaching stuff, there's a lot of questions that are kind of tied together. So we're going to try to, I don't say lump them all together, but I think we'll answer a lot of the stuff or a lot of the questions with maybe one of our discussions about it. So I'll just start with Platt, USMNT fan on Twitter. Thank you for your support and thanks for the question. What coaching replacements, and this is already getting ahead of it, Platt's already looking forward and not looking in the past. What coaching replacements do you think are reasonable and upgrades on the three Gs of Gregg Berhalter, Heath? And there's some options out there, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's really tough to say because I, like any USMNT fan, am dreaming big, right? I dream of the Carlo Ancelottis, the Jose Mourinhos, the Zidanes, I'm not so much a Jose Mourinho fan for the national team. I think he'll take over Portugal from what I'm understanding anyway. There's that potential on the line, and that could be a good sort of stopping place for his career.
But wait. He's trying to do both. He wants to coach Roma and Portugal at the same time.
Of course he does. That guy, he's one of the few people in the world that wants to have his cake and eat it too all the time. Not just on Sundays, not just like after on a nice brunch. He wants to have 7 days a week cake and eat it too.
Well, what's interesting is that when I heard that Peter Vermes and he's the Sporting Kansas City coach in MLS, and a longtime coach, and obviously played for the men's national team and played in the '90 World Cup. And I heard that he would be interested in the job if he could have coached the U.S. and Sporting KC at the same time, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
but I heard they talked to him about it. And that's what he wanted to do, and they're like, "That's ridiculous. No chance."
Honestly, I think it's, and I think Jesse Marsch said it well, like in his lack of interest in the national team. It's a completely different sport, right? The national team, in terms of you're spending 99% of your time managing a network of scouts, of players, your youth teams. You're much more involved in sort of the holistic view. Whereas at the club level, you're only as good as your next result, right? And yes, you have an off season and you can build and you hope to have enough time to accomplish your goals. But at the national team level, there's so much that you don't control. You don't control the daily environments of the players. You can control your communication and the knowledge you can seek, but it's a lot of management of relationships and people, and not just the players, but the people at the clubs that feed back, your scouting network, your youth teams, your pipeline of players. It's very, I think, very, very different in terms of that. And so
okay, well, using that as a barometer then,
yeah,
if that's a lot of the job, I think a lot of people are okay with Gregg in that space, given that he got a lot of key dual nationals, Yunus Musa, Serginho Dest, to name a few. And it seems like he created good vibes, right? The culture's pretty good. It seems like there's a nice, strong, vibrant group there that care for each other. And so he ticks a couple of those boxes, it seems, right?
Yeah.
I guess the question then is it time to just hand it off to somebody else? I think everybody knows where we stand. That, or at least I can speak for myself. I can't speak for you. I always do that. And then Charlie's like, don't put words in my mouth. That's my Charlie voice. But I don't think no matter how good the coach has done, unless it's like winning the World Cup, I don't think that, or having like an overachieving run, let's say at the World Cup, then I don't think you should bring back that particular person. Now, I mean, there's this coach from Morocco, Walid Regragui, who took over the job 3 months before the World Cup started, like 107 days before the World Cup started is when he took over. And their only loss during that whole time was to France in a game that they actually played pretty well, despite not having like 4 or 5 key players fully fit. And I would love to have that guy, but that's a guy that,
France had 4 or 5 players, not
true,
not fully fit either. But
that's true. Appreciate you bringing that up. But I would say that like that Regragui guy, I would give him another World Cup cycle because he was so fresh into this one, and clearly that success can be built upon.
Yeah.
But Gregg seems like a little bit different, and I feel like he's done what he's going to do. And when I think about the ceiling of what else can Gregg do now with this current group that he already hasn't done, can they take bigger steps moving forward? And
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think we've hit a ceiling with what Gregg can provide. And I wonder if he knows that too, because he's never going to have a better opportunity to make a jump somewhere than he does right now. And so if he wants to get back over and coach in Europe, or whatever he wants to do, this is the time to do it. It won't be in 2 years or a year and a half if he gets fired, right? His stock will be way down. It's interesting times for both U.S. soccer and for Gregg, looking at this kind of, as you say, in a bigger picture. But go ahead.
Yeah,
anyway, there are some options out there.
Yeah. So, I think we can get deeper into options but what I don't want to do is go into like La La Land and think about things that aren't going to be realistic, But I think
you telling me Zidane doesn't want to coach us?
I actually think that's not a bad one. If you're Zidane and you've done it all already at his young age and you've accomplished it all,
he's taking over France. Come on.
Yeah, he's taking over France. But somebody like a Zidane, right? That doesn't have necessarily something left to prove on the club level, is known for being a people manager because we need that, but also brings a system, also brings the respect of having played the game at a high level. Now, before I say anything beyond for Gregg Berhalter, I do think we need to change. I think Gregg Berhalter was successful in this World Cup. I think he was successful in the way that Bob Bradley was successful. He was successful in the way that not quite Bruce Arena in 2002, but Jurgen Klinsmann was in 2014, right? They accomplished the goal of getting out of the group stages, and then we took a beating. There was a lot of tactical issues throughout, but every single World Cup that we've played in, this was the highest expectation we had of the players, right? If we got by any means, we could have played as ugly as ever. And if you remember 2002 even, we were scrapping, It wasn't like we were dominating games.
No, we
were. We were more like I'm trying to think of what the team is without disrespecting that team in this World Cup, where we were willing to take a bad turnover and punch somebody in the face, pre-Gegenpress, just bad turnover, go down to the inline, finish a ball, and then fight like hell for our lives. And so I think Gregg's been successful, but I don't think Gregg can go any further because I think the players are ready for something different. I think it's time for him to hand the baton off because I do think he's moved the ball down the field, for lack of a better way. And somebody else needs to take it further than that. I don't think the next coach comes in and we're starting at 0. And I think that another coach could have been in Gregg's position and been further back than where we are now, right? In terms of recruitment, the way the team's playing, some of the flashes that we saw. I think there's still a little bit of a rigidity and a lack of freedom to really sort of getting the most out of, it's like driving a nice German sports car on the U.S. freeways where you know that thing can go 140 and be in full control, but it's going 70 right now at the speed limit. You know, like we take the governors off of the go-karts and allow them to play a little more open. For those of you that grew up with anybody in your neighborhood who had a go-kart, and they used to talk about these governors where it's like, man, I could get this thing up to 35 if I take this thing off. But yeah, I don't think it's replace great because it's a failure. I think he fell short of, I think, the lofty goals, the let's call it the flex goal, but he reached the first goal, which is get out of the group stage. And I don't think that is a place where you can say, let's do another 3 years of this and hope that it goes beyond that. I think it's a success. And now we hand that off to the next person. Okay, so when we think about replacements, then, just to kind of put a bow on that part of the conversation, there are some names out there. You have basically managers. If we're looking at only international-based guys that have that experience, because you can sense that the club guys like to stay in the club scene. With regard to Jesse Marsch, I had a conversation with him when I went to Leeds, just kind of joking about him taking over, and he's just not ready for the European adventure to end and this club adventure that he's on, and he just didn't even want to think about it. Now, in 2 years' time, if he doesn't have a job for whatever reason and this is available, I could see him taking it, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. This is a really big decision by U.S. Soccer, so I hope that they take their time, even if we have to bring an interim coach for January or whatever they decide, or even you can still let Gregg have that January camp and then just say, hey, this is going to be the last one or whatever, right? There's plenty of ways to work through this with good communication, and good communication ultimately is the good way to solve a lot of things. But you have Roberto Martinez from Belgium, who I think really underperformed this World Cup. I don't think he managed his group well at all, but he has gotten Belgium into a World Cup semifinal before. As you mentioned before in a previous podcast, that would probably bring Thierry Henry along with him. I'm okay with that. That guy knows some things. As long as he's not the head coach. He hasn't really killed it as a head coach, but I think he'd be really valuable, especially as we try to develop a number 9. That was always my big thrill for having Jurgen Klinsmann involved. It's like, all right, we got a proper number 9. He's going to make our strikers like world beaters, and he didn't coach at all. So that's a different conversation. But I would say that, you have those options. I'm seeing that Oscar Pereira's name, who won Orlando City, the Open Cup this past year, got him into the playoffs. I think he does a good job of getting the most out of his particular group of players. I think that's important. That's an important quality that we should be looking for in a coach. There's one coach. But Jimmy, before you go beyond that real quick, on Oscar Pereira, he's still a guy that, having known him from the FC Dallas days, having known how passionate he is about the youth and the next generation player, I would still love to see him as like our youth technical director, or even our sort of maybe the most senior of our youth national team's head coach, but overseeing sort of development and pathways, because he's another one that I think does a really great job of recruitment. I think culturally he understands the multiple almost identities that exist in terms of player types in the United States that is very unique, right? If you looked at Morocco, they all play a very certain way outside of like Amrabat, like and even he's technical, but he's a little bit more of your traditional 6, but everybody on that team can first touch, dribble, explosive. You could swap one player with another. They have a real identity to their group. The U.S., I think, is always going to struggle with identity. But I think we got closer in this World Cup in terms of like, are we a team that's possession based? Do we have the skill sets? Do we have technical ability? Do we have pace on the wings? We have all those things, is what I think we've learned from this World Cup. We've just now got to turn that into a almost cultural identity that plays well. Sorry, that meant to just talk about Pereira, but I got distracted. No. I'm glad you brought that in. I think that Pereira does have some unique gifts that would make him valuable in a lot of different ways to our national team program. So I'm glad that you filled that gap for me. They have Juan Carlos Osorio, who led Mexico to the World Cup in 2018. He's obviously coached in MLS as well. You see the Pochettinos. I think he's going to take a club job. You have the Mourinhos, the Zidans. This just don't feel real. But there's one coach that Kasper Juland, who is the head coach of Denmark. And I don't know if he's going to resign or whatever. They obviously had a terrible World Cup, but they were amazing in qualifying. They were amazing in the Euros the summer before. And I thought that he got a lot out of that particular group of players. And I wish that would have been demonstrated in this World Cup as well. But somebody like that, how can you get the most out of your group and not try to force them to be anything that they're not?
but still allow them to raise their game in a certain way that, to your point, has an identity, because we saw it emerge with the Morocco under Regragui, the coach. They were very defensive, of course, but they still had something going forward, right? They were always you felt like they were dangerous. You know
what I will say from that, Jimmy, and I was live at their semifinal game against France, and while it wasn't the greatest of games generally, there's no doubt that if you removed Morocco's history in World Cups and whatever, and you put any other like historical giant on crest on them, they would look like they belonged in a semifinal of a World Cup. They looked like they matched up. You know, sometimes you feel a little bit of that nerve from teams. Like when Poland played against France, you could see that was like outmatched. US against Netherlands, after a few moments, they just feel a little bit of that like arriving late, a little bit of that almost tension and nerves. Like at no point did Morocco feel like they couldn't beat France, and they looked the part, right? France gave them a few opportunities. They could have gone down and scored those throughout the game, right? And I think that identity, that belief, and maybe it is just circumstantial and the wave that they're riding. But usually when that wave comes to an end, they look outmatched. You know, at some point they go, okay, the run is over, because they finally came down to earth and their real ability showed through, not this super ability. But they had this identity that didn't waver, and at no point looked like, oh, this is a team that just got lucky, you know? And I think
that's a good point. No, I agree. And I think that's what we're all thirsting for in some capacity. It just felt, I guess it just feels a little easier to accept a loss in any competition if you felt like we were the best team, or we were still putting our best foot forward. We were still trying to do things and stay true to who we are and what we're about. And you could see that incremental progress that you want to see, which is what I think we're collectively scared about, us, our producers, all the fans, after the Japan and Saudi Arabia game, because it looked like we took steps back. So I think that the group stages in some ways were a pleasant surprise. We had a nice mix of players. The buy-in was clearly there, and that makes such a big difference. And then once you get that one result, even though we gave up a goal late to Wales, like there was still, hey, we got this. We never looked like we were out of sorts. And then when we got against the Netherlands team that just were a little more tactically astute and a little bit more clinical in their options and opportunities, that's the fine margins that we talk about. Luis Enrique is an interesting one from Spain. You know, obviously plenty of experience developing young players, being around young players, playing.
He's another one though that, like you're talking about, I mean, from a personality standpoint, I think they would eat him up in the U.S. They would love him, right? Because he's open, he's honest, he says all kinds of crazy things, and people like that. But another guy, just like Roberto Martinez, that hasn't, as recently, lived up to the expectations, right? Still attractive. And I feel like if we're going to crush Gregg for where he got, and then hold Luis Enrique, but he was great. He was a better player, or he had way more tools to deal with, you know? This is a super team of young players. Same with Roberto Martinez with all that experience. Like it is a game of moments, and it comes down to that. But at a certain point, we've got to like level that out. I'm excited about both of those guys, and I do think they could take
totally.
But they're also coming off of World Cups where, you know, they with the tools that they had, even more than the U.S., underperformed.
Okay, so let's talk. This is kind of in the Gregg vein, and we'll just kind of keep going on the Gregg stuff until our first break. But this one is from Mauricio Guti. What's up, Mauricio? Is a manager informing a player before a tournament that he won't play much leadership with transparency, or more so demotivating for the player? And when I first read this, I thought it depends on the player, was my first answer. Like the first thing I thought of was it just depends on the player. And I think that is where the leadership comes in. You have to know the type of player you're dealing with. And obviously the big mistake, and we've already talked about this a little bit, Heath, in previous podcasts, is that Gregg made a mistake by bringing that up. If you are talking about having a team where you explicitly tell the group that any trouble or any issues or any tension inside the team stays with the team, then you can't bring it up no matter what. I don't care if it's a private leadership conference or whatever. You just can't bring it up. You have to stay true to that. And so there's other questions about, does Gregg lose the group after this? And I think this will blow over ultimately if Gregg ends up staying. And I think that they'll probably have to have some conversations, the whole group and Gio included, But I think it just depends on the player. And because if Gregg told us this, and I had a conversation with DeMarcus Beasley, okay? And Bob Bradley told DeMarcus before the 2010 World Cup that he wasn't going to play. And DeMarcus was like, all right, and wasn't happy about it. But it's not isolated to Gregg. We've also had another manager in Bob Bradley. And if DeMarcus, he's not bullshitting us. He's telling what happened. And he didn't play. He played like 20 minutes in the Algeria game right at the end, and that was it. He really didn't play all that much. This is DeMarcus Beasley, considered one of our best to ever do it, and should be considered one of our best. And that happened to him from Bob. And so now I don't think Bob went around and told people about it afterwards, and maybe that this is where Gregg's shortcoming is, and he's going to have to learn pretty harshly about this mistake. But what are your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I think that DeMarcus is a great example because we both. It's a great example for you and I. I think it's a hard one to contextualize for people. The personality of Bob, right? I don't think Bob. There was a lot of things about DeMarcus Beasley that Bob didn't like, right? He didn't like his lifestyle. He didn't like the untapped potential of DeMarcus Beasley in Bob's mind of thinking, if I could just get him to be the professional that I want him to be, and program his mind a certain way, I can get more out of him. And I think as we got to that World Cup, right, at left midfield, you had options, and at left back, you had Bornstein and you had Carlos.
He wasn't really being considered though at left back at that point.
No, not at that point. It was after that.
What's crazy to me is that Bees played more World Cup games in 2014 when he's older playing defense than in 2010, which is probably closer to his peak. Anyway,
it's crazy. And so what the point I'm trying to get at is like, it feels oddly personal, right? And I don't mean it personal in like a vengeance type of way, but Bob felt that he knew DeMarcus Beasley and he needed to deliver this message to DeMarcus. Now, it's hard for me to believe at times that a coach comes up and goes, hey, just a heads up, you're not going to play. It's usually a conversation like, I don't have you in my lineup, but I need you ready. Like I when the circumstances are right, I need you. And so I feel like that's where the message is a little bit bastardized in the media right now about this whole idea that like somebody pulls him aside and goes, listen, you're not going to play. Because that's not, I don't think any coach tells somebody that. It's more of like, I don't see you in my team, right? I've kind of got my team set. You're still a hugely important member. You're valuable as a leader. You're valuable for this. But like my team is taking shape and I don't see you in that, right? It's not so much like because then the whole idea of like, why would you even bring anybody to a World Cup if you're not going to play them? So I don't think it's that extreme. And I think sometimes we look at it in this extreme way that somebody's just saying, like, you're out of the team for the World Cup. And that's just not, there's 40 other players you could bring in if you had zero plans, right? It's more of like, listen, I got my group and the way things are shaping up, you're not part of that group. My very first camp with Bruce Arena, he straight up said that to me. He said, I'm going to try to get you time because you're young, but you're not the guy right now, like you're not the guy I'm going to play. And I ended up getting 4 caps in a row under him, and then getting the one just before the 2010 World Cup. And I was taking scrap minutes, I was eating it up. I started 2, came off the bench in 2, actually 3 of my first caps. And the ones that I started, he was very clearly not impressed. And I was sort of building there, right? But he was at least open and honest to me, and it hurt. And I took it like, hey, your career is done. You should just, because it's hard, right? But like, I guess to go back to the question, I think that's really good leadership if done the right way. Now, once that gets out, then it's all open to all of us to interpret like how that conversation happened, right? And we know Gio's a fiery guy, and we know that he wants to play, and we know that he wants to contribute. He wants to do all these things, but I think it's all in not what you say and how you say it, as cliche as that sounds, and really, really important, because there's a lot of coaches that had they talked to me in a different way, I would have been fine. But we're all human after all. We do the best that we can to communicate. But the coaches I respected the most were the ones that knew just nuance, right? They knew you as a person. They knew, how am I going to deliver this efficiency? How do I have to show empathy or care or whatever it is that's going on? And I think that is what separates our group now and the level of, even on the manager conversation, who can actually do that consistently and take us to the next level, and also, kind of the players being able to respond to that as well. Another long game.
No, I love that. No. It's great insight. It's great insight. All right, we're going to take
What about you?
No,
we're
well,
going to go to break. Yeah,
I was going to go to break, but okay, let me just. I would say yes. One of my things that I loved about Bruce was how he communicated. And not only in terms of, like, say you started a game under Bruce, he gave you 3 things that he wanted you to be good at that game. That none of it was result driven, right? I need you to do these 3 things for the team. If you do these 3 things for the team and everybody else does their 3 things, we're probably going to come out with a result, right? Yeah. The result's a byproduct of how everybody executes and performs. Right. And so I love that. And then I come into Bob, who I admired. I admired Bob. I still do. I think that he has had a tremendous career despite our beefs. And there was something about him that was very purposeful in terms of his tactics and in the way that he wanted to manage. Now, that said, I had a bubbly personality, and I never felt like that's exactly what he wanted. I think he wanted me, or all of us, to be like him, eating, drinking, and sleeping the game 24/7. And when we weren't at practice, we were watching it on TV. And if we weren't watching it on TV, we were talking about it. And that's just not for everybody. Some of us need some balance, especially if we have wife and kids and other things going on in our lives. So I thought that had Bob handled a couple of situations, and I had told him this when we were having our discussions, that if he just would give me this and listen to me here, I will lay on railroad tracks for this guy. But when he didn't and fought back, it just started our relationship, because I didn't feel like I was listened to. And at that point, I didn't feel like I was valued or cared about. I was just basically cattle at that point. Now, he could come on here and fight me and, verbally fight me. And we could talk about a whole host of things. But that's how it came across. That's how I received it. And that's on me a little bit, right? You talk to sports psychologists. Nobody can control the way you feel. Only you can control the way that you feel, right? Yeah. So there's a lot to dig into there. And that took me a long time to separate that, what I'm hearing and how I'm receiving it and what I'm going to do there. And that's probably its own podcast. But yeah, I think communication is super key. And I think that where Gregg, his first mistake was obviously saying this out loud. The second one, post World Cup. And I feel like, and I mentioned this before, he wanted to get that off his chest. He was taking so much heat for the Gio Reyna stuff. He wanted people to know that he wasn't alone. And this is why he did it. I get where it came from him. He just shouldn't have done it. But then also, it feels like with how he handled Gio, I mean, Gio's got to take responsibility for it too. It's not all on Gregg, obviously, but I don't know. I mean, if you can only kid glove a guy so long, and if he's going to continue to have a bad attitude, I don't know what you're going to do about it. Anyway, we're going to take our first and only break of this In Soccer We Trust. And when we come back, well, I'm going to answer more of your questions, so don't go anywhere.
Don't stop watching. Christian Pulisic.
Outstanding from the American.
All skill, all class, and all American at work across the pond.
Pulisic finds the net.
The UEFA Champions League. Stream Chelsea matches live February on Paramount+.
Welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Cream Cheese Trash Can Conradinho, also known as Jim Conrad, with Hollywood Heath Pearce, and we are answering your questions from the mailbag. Unfortunately, Charlie Davies is afraid of your questions and has refused to be here on today's show. All right, let's kind of get away from the Gregg stuff a little bit and talk. And actually, this is a question directly for you because you were on this team. This is from Diego on Twitter, who says, was the 2022 team, this World Cup team, more talented than the 2009 Confederations Cup team? I already know what Charlie's going to say, but I actually want to hear from you, Heath, on why or why not.
I mean, here's where I'm starting to see the difference, right? Now, do I think that Confederations Cup, had we won that, it's the greatest achievement in the history of U.S. soccer? Absolutely. Do I think getting to a final is a massive thing? But let's not forget, we lost the opener, and by no means were we supposed to win these.
Right.
Lost the opener to Italy. Comfortably lost. Lost the second one to Brazil. Comfortably lost. Went into the third game. And again, I tell this story all the time. We were all planning our flights. Where were we going? There was 2 or 3 of us, Charlie and myself, and I can't remember one other, going to play the Gold Cup after. We were all on our way out. And then all of a sudden, circumstances, we win 3-0. Brazil beats Italy 3-0. Now we're in a semifinal. The semifinal game, we punched them in the face a couple times. And then we fought to the death. Was that
something that did Bob say something in that one? Or is it just like the team was ready to go? Like you were feeling you were playing with house money. And
it was a little bit of house money.
Nobody expected you to get any type of result against Spain, and you went out there and did it. I mean, this is a team that was in between winning the Euros and the World Cup.
Yeah. This was a team who was on, at that point, a record-breaking unbeaten run. They had won the Euros, and they were about to win the World Cup, right? Like, we were stuck somewhere, sandwiched in the middle of, like, literally one of the greatest teams in history. And we smacked them a couple times. but we fought like hell. And that's the American national team, USA, all the way. Like that is the DNA of our team. Talent-wise, we had a lot of good players as well. This was, again, the breakout period of Charlie Davies. But when I look at this team now and I see them go into a World Cup, yes, qualifying mimicked every qualifying team I've ever seen. Maybe you feel differently, Jimmy. I want your answer on this too. It mimicked the struggles of every qualifying nation. There's always that sort of tension point of like, are we going to qualify? Are we not? We have to get these points. Look, go throughout history for the U.S. men's national team. But this World Cup team actually showed me the way that at the age that they are and the way that they matched up against these teams outside of the Netherlands. And again, I know you can say, well, all that matters is the Netherlands, right? Because that's the game of consequence the most. That they are insanely talented. If you look at the clubs the players are playing at now, insanely talented. Now, the only argument that I would have is that you're talking about a national team in 2009-10 of a team at their prime age, peak of their careers. So maybe there's a little bit more polish to them, a little bit more experience at the international level than this group had. Maybe they could have handled the Netherlands a little bit smarter, or more in a more clever way, or more composed way, had they played the Netherlands with the 2009 team. But overall, like where this team is going, I don't think anybody's going to touch them. Like, and results will show that. Talent-wise, I think they're already there, you know. But how they accomplish as a national team, I think this team is going to surpass in any group in history.
I wasn't part of the 2009 team. Yeah, so I can't really speak to obviously watched it.
But you were at the Gold Cup, right? So like
I was at the Gold Cup, yes.
Yeah, so you're still in the national team in that period. You just weren't at
Yeah. Well, I got my call back for the Gold Cup after being in the dark for 18 months. So that was a pleasant surprise, to be honest, and got to be a captain a couple times. And then I got my big concussion, and that sucked, which could have maybe really slowed me down from getting back onto that World Cup team in 2010. But I'm not bitter or sad. But I would say that
with a sports psychologist.
I do.
Literally, they're like, yeah, I'll come to
I'll
come to Doha for a month, but you got to bring my friend. They're like, is it your real friend, Jimmy, or is it the person that you talk to in the mirror every night?
I got an invisible, like
I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that going on in my life, I think, throughout the years. But I would say that, yeah, I mean, this team did exhibit a lot of the similar traits for our national teams throughout the years. It's tough to get through qualifying. I think the only time we kind of cruised through qualifying was ahead of the 2006 World Cup, where we were pretty much in complete control, no real slip-ups, and then beat Mexico at home in Columbus to book our ticket with a couple of games in hand, or one game to spare where we didn't have much to worry about. But it was really never in doubt. It just mattered whether we were going to finish first or not. But outside of that, you know, it looks similar. The group stages were not easy, and we found a way to survive. And we've done that out of 3 out of the last 4 World Cups that we've been in, and I think that speaks to that. But ultimately, to your point, in terms of talent, in terms of future, in terms of potential, this group is, I think, well ahead of previous groups, and it's all there, right? And now it's actually the crescendo of incoming the 2026 World Cup that we're hosting is insane.
But I also want to point out, Jimmy, is that Spain failed, Belgium failed, Germany failed, 2 World Cups in a row, Italy not here, you know, like England failed, quarterfinals out, you know, like these are all teams like sometimes there's this belief in American sports mentality is you just keep going up, and up is just a thing you see vertically, right? And then you get to the top and you stay there. And the national team is so much more nuanced than that, of what that actually means of bringing it all together. A golden generation has to last 12, 14 years, period wise, where you actually have like the tools, and then you add 2, 3 more, one piece every year and a half that makes something better. That I don't think it's going to be as like this group is just going to keep on going until we're number 1. And then we never look back. Like there's a lot of pieces that go into that when you look at it, that sometimes we look at our national team and you go, oh, round of 16, they failed. You know, they suck. But if you look at the biggest national teams, Brazil failed, like in terms of like number 1 in the world, failed, right? Like what their expectations are and what ours are seem to be the exact same, even though they're Brazil and we're the US. And I think that there's more nuance than that. And we
for sure
that you don't see sometimes the growth that's happening, I guess what I'm saying.
No, of course. And I think it's there. I think it's pretty evident to most. We have 2 more questions for this podcast. And guess what? We're going to have another mailbag special episode coming very soon, because happy holidays, everybody. Get to enjoy us while you're sipping on some hot chocolate or whatever you like to do for the holidays, you crazy bastards. Okay, so
put us on your TV. I've seen people watch us on their TV, Jimmy, and it's pretty nice. It feels like
that is pretty cool. I appreciate that. I probably should have brushed my teeth then.
Smart TVs.
I thought we were just thought they were just listening. All right. So this one can be a quick answer. And then we'll have another one we can maybe dive into a little bit. Mm-hmm. This one's from the Kings of CONCACAF podcast. Great name for a podcast. Appreciate you guys' support. Keep up the good work, growing the game here. And we appreciate you. They say, who is one player that you weren't originally high on of this World Cup roster, but proved you wrong? Heath Pearce.
That I wasn't that high on this roster, but proved me wrong. I would probably say Serginho Dest.
That's not a bad shout, actually. I was thinking that as well. I mean, he was definitely in my top three.
I'd probably say Timo Weah also. I liked Timo Weah, but there was always
this version of Timo Weah was excellent. He was good.
Yeah, efficient, doesn't waste a lot of time. He was some of those things that we saw in qualifying where you're like, he made the game more predictable in the attack than anybody else. He's gonna drive down and whip a ball in, or his combination play. But I would say Serginho Dest. One, because this guy spent a year at Ajax before getting the big move. And everybody saw the flash and the technical abilities that he had. It's second to none. But then you go, well, what's the value of that if he doesn't have a final product? Or if he can't, if you're going to be cheating into the attack, you got to be really good every game in the attack, right? You can't have luxury players as a fullback or even a wingback. And so when I watched him in this World Cup, his willingness to defend, his ability to get into good spots and put in dangerous balls, he just has a level where if you watch him versus Anthony Robinson, who I think continues to get better, there's not a lot of when Serginho Dest gets down to the touchline, I'm like, he's going to find somebody on a pass. He's going to find the next pass. He knows where the next play is going to be, and he can do it at a very high level. And so for me, I was kind of worried about him, especially because we brought 14 right backs to this World Cup that I felt like even Gregg was worried about him. But from that first game on, I was like, this is the guy. He's got to be on the field because I know he's going to play honestly defensively, and offensively, he's one of our best players. So I know I probably should have known that already, but we've seen it, high highs and low lows from him in the team, and he wasn't playing a lot at Milan coming into the World Cup. So yeah, how about you?
I think prove me wrong sounds pretty harsh. I don't know if we didn't have some type of buy-in on everybody on the roster. But I think more pleasantly surprised, and I think Serginho Dest definitely falls into that, and he would be near my top of my list as well. I actually thought Aaron Long was excellent. He made no mistakes in this past World Cup. That's my joke. So shout out to Aaron
zing
Long.
it!
Zing! You're just throwing some zingers out. I would say that given how he performs against Japan, I was a little bit worried about Weston McKennie, and I thought that he was good. Obviously, him scoring against England would have been immense, to take that lead when he had a great opportunity. But I just thought overall he was influential. He seemed positive out there. I think the group responded to his energy. When he's got positive energy, he's another player that when he's playing with a smile on his face, he's just this really great, terrific version of himself. And it seemed like the whole team was in that space for the most part outside of Gio. But I would say that I was pleasantly surprised with Weston. Josh Sargent's another one that I was pleasantly surprised with. Came in and did the work and had some good hold-up play. And sure, he didn't get on the end of anything, but I think we were missing him in that last game against Netherlands. So he would be there. I
think Sargent's a good surprise as well. Sargent's a really
a pleasant surprise, right? A pleasant surprise. And so he would fall into that. And Timo Weah, I think, would probably be my other one. So, all right, that's that.
Oddly, Jimmy, the last note on that is I feel like I went into this World Cup locked and loaded to answer that question on guys that I thought Gregg Berhalter would go to deeper in the roster, and he didn't go to him, It was a pretty consistent lineup for the first time since he started coaching, other than when Sebastian Lletget played every game for 2 years under him. There was just this consistency to the team that, like you said, I think harsh would be it's a harsh way to, the question is a little bit harsh compared to pleasantly surprised or overachieved what my expectations were or what my worries were, because there's players further down in the roster that I thought I was going to say, I'm worried if they get on the field. And I never actually got a chance to judge a number of players,
Okay, so in that vein, we'll leave this one as the last one and just know that we have another mailbag special coming, so don't worry. This one's from Coach Caruso, who says, how many American transfers are we going to see because of their performance at the World Cup? And I think that right now, obviously, Tyler Adams is hot and heavy, being linked to Manchester United. I don't think that Leeds would let him go in January. I think they're going to, at the very least, make him see out the year and then potentially sell him in the summer, which would be pretty crazy for him to bounce one season after joining Leeds. Not that hasn't been done before, but that would be pretty remarkable. And I'd be really proud of him, obviously, to have that opportunity and to take another step up in his career. But I kind of want to see him finish the season as well. I feel like and I think he's mentioned it already publicly, that he's got some unfinished business to do with Leeds, as he does. But I think another, 5-6 months in the Premier League.
I think he will go in the summer.
Help out a lot.
I mean, it's also like, I don't think Man United is like, we need this guy today to finish out our season where we want, right? I think he's a player for the future for them. And so, yeah, I agree. I think he will move in the summer if the price is right. Yunus Musa is another guy I think is going to move.
Only $20 million for Yunus Musa right now. $20 million.
Yeah. I'm guessing that there's some sort of tag on him. There's got to be that like they're not going to go above. But like, yeah, he's another player, but he's still super young. He's not like wildly influential yet. But a team that's going to pay 20 can definitely see 40 on him in the future, in terms of the business side of things. It's hard to say. I mean, Matt Turner, I think at some point deserves a move. It's going to be always hard to compare to the life and the wages that he has at Arsenal. But for his own ambition, there could be somebody that's coming in saying, hey,
what about Jedi?
Jedi is another one linked to big clubs. What is it? A lot of Italian clubs are into him.
Yeah, I could see him making a move. I also like that Serginho Dest might get his contract permanently, his loan move permanently made by Milan, which would be great. So,
yeah,
I don't know. Those are the ones. I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, and then outside of that, I can't really.
Timo Weah?
Trying to think. Yeah, Timo Weah, I think, is going to go. But the hard part is, like, he's probably the only one that hasn't been starting consistently for a long time. Right. Not for a long time, but injuries and things like that. That, like, going back to his club situation, I think is going to dictate a lot of where that step goes in the summertime. Or at least he can force his hand to say, hey, play me or sell me, which I think is a good situation for him to be in. But he's certainly one I think is opened some eyes as well.
All right, those are the answers to your questions for now. Like I've been mentioning, we're going to have another one of these episodes coming for you very, very soon. So thank you for all these questions. Keep those coming because we like doing mailbag episodes, and it seems like it generates a lot of good conversation for us as well. And if you're listening to this on CBSSports.com, we want to let you know that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast by simply searching In Soccer We Trust on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on the YouTubes, keep hitting that like and subscribe button. And go follow us on the podcast if you'd like as well. We're available on all podcast platforms. And, of course, we're going to deliver world-class soccer coverage during the World Cup and beyond because that's what we do. So thank you for your support, and we'll see you for the next episode. Later.